So I think about this idea of the colliding of two worlds, the old world giving way to a new world. It's a pattern. I see it, all of Jesus' healing stories and his miracle stories about something old needs to be released so something new can be embraced. And there's a great example of it on the road to Palm Sunday. There's a story that Jesus and the followers are on their way to Jerusalem, and they have an encounter with two blind beggars sitting by the side of the road from Jericho. And one of them calls out, becomes aware that it's Jesus walking by. They said, "Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David." And the crowd said, be quiet, don't bother him. But they call out even more loudly, "Have mercy on us." Jesus stopped and he heard it. And he said, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the blind men said, "Lord, let our eyes be opened." And Jesus was moved by compassion. He stopped. He touched their eyes. And immediately they regained their sight. And they got up and walked with him. So Jericho, we're told the men were from Jericho. Charles Fillmore said that represents the intellect, that it's actually the opposite of Jerusalem, which is perfect peace. And yet the intellect is a phase of our understanding that we go through. And it can be helpful as long as it doesn't become egotistical or focused on material things. We can have an intellectual understanding and awakening, but as long as it's in service to a higher purpose. And the blind men from Jericho, we might say they represented a phase of consciousness, that they had impaired vision, that they couldn't see. Yet there was something in them that knew that something else was possible. They wouldn't have called out if there wasn't, a seed of something in them that said, "Lord, help us. God, just as I said with forgiveness, Father, forgive them for what they do, but sometimes we need to ask for help." And the crowds, to me, are like the naysayers in our lives. They're saying, "Oh, don't bother Jesus. He's got more important stuff to do. You're not worthy." It's like Oprah being fired from that job at a broadcast station. That made her even more determined to go into broadcasting. I love that our Lenten book reading says that as we observe our thoughts of unworthiness, instead of dwelling on times when we stumble, we can remind ourselves of the truth of our being, that we keep our thoughts focused on learning from our experiences rather than being defined by or tied by the past. And we can release fears and doubts. So those two blind men by the side of the road from Jericho, they represent our thoughts. They represent thoughts within us that are ready to be healed, that want to be transformed. And, of course, Jesus represents the new story, what's possible when we let go of the old story. You will notice that Jesus didn't stop there and have a conversation with them and say, "Oh, that's too bad that you're blind, and what'd you do to deserve that?" And, it's tough. Life is awful, isn't it? I guess you'll just have to learn to live with this. But no, he stopped, and it was one of those moments like touching the hem of the garment, when there was this moment when suddenly he touched them, or that consciousness. They had an experience of that highest level of consciousness. Suddenly it was like they could see when they couldn't see before. Their vision was healed. I've had people tell me sometimes that, that art and music never really meant much to them. They didn't get it. And then at some point they went somewhere and they had an experience that was so powerful. It was so deep and moving. It's like, wow, that suddenly something inside them like just came alive, and then they said, I get it now. I get it why people go to the symphony, or I get it why people appreciate art, or something like that. So, this is, Jesus says this many times in the healing stories, whether it's the lame man, where he says, stand up, take your mat, and walk. What he's doing is he's inviting people to step into a new story in their lives, to leave the old story behind and step into a new story. And to me, the healing of the blind men from Jericho represents the power of the I am, or the power of our Christ consciousness to restore us to wholeness by the activity of spiritual ideas. And so that's what happened just before Palm Sunday. That's what happened on the way